Shalom Israel. First and foremost, I want to say all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to you brothers throughout the four corners of the earth, teaching the truth and righteousness and sincerity. To your Israelite foreigners, come back home to the truth. To those that passed away serving the Lord, the dead in Yahweh Shai shall arise first. All right, I want to do this video because it's important that we bring out the history. You know, when I go into these history books that I've purchased over the years, is deep, man. Because one thing that you have to realize is it took a lot of money to build up this library. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna sit here and brag about the books in my library, but it's not no bragging matter. It's about getting the truth and being able to prove the truth out here in the streets. You know what I'm saying? So one thing that I want to kind of stop. I've already posted 2 book reports. This is my third since we've had the new page. You know, I want to tell you brothers, you know what I'm saying, you know, don't waste time. You know, get these books, get this information, or if you don't get the books, at least watch these videos and get the history in it. Don't fuck what I'm saying, fuck me. Get the history in it. You know what I'm saying? See if you could get the books. That's why I make sure that you know what book it is. You know what I mean? And if anything, brothers got my email address. You can find out what book it is. You know what I'm saying? Right now, this book, this is the one I'm about to do right now. Lost Tribes and Promised Lands by Ronald Sanders. Now, this book was overpriced on Amazon for many years because they're trying to keep us from the truth. All right. It went from like, it was like $200-300. Now it's $25. I looked at it today. You know, and this is a very important book for you to get if you want to be able to prove history. You know, because a lot of people going to come up and say, hey, how do you know the so-called Hispanics of Israel? What you going to hit them with? Just scriptures? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you could. But then a lot of times, you know, you're going to have a lot of people that come up. They'll say, oh, the 10 tribes is in Africa somewhere. Oh, the 10 tribes is this. Prove to these motherfuckers who the 10 tribes are, man. All right, so with that, with no further ado, I'm going to go into, because this book right here is really deep, man. I would say this is probably deeper than the last 2 books I did. Because it's got a lot of key information, history-wise. I'm going to start at page 17, chapter 1. It says, the results were soon to be revolutionary. Antagonism, which had before been almost purely religious, writes the historian Henry Charles Lee, became racial, while religious antagonism became heightened in Spain, which through the earlier Middle Ages had been the most tolerant land in Christendom, became, as the 15th century advanced, the most fanatically intolerant. Now, you have to learn how to read these things. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to start reading from the rip, and I'm going to break it down after every, you know, precept. The results were soon to be revolutionary, meaning I'm about to read something that's a total change from the way things were going before. Revolution means change. Antagonism, which had before been almost purely religious. So people were being antagonized solely or persecuted based on religion, writes the historian Henry Charles Lee, became racial. So people used to get persecuted because of their beliefs. Now we're being persecuted in the 15th century or around the 15th century because of their race. This is heavy because this is around the time when Esau started taking over Europe, starting in 1453 AD, because Genghis Khan, he took over, but he didn't make it where the whole world was actually at his feet. You know what I'm saying? He didn't literally conquer the whole world. You know, and nor did he keep it. You know what he did conquer. All right, so it says, while religious antagonism became heightened, because there was still religious antagonism in Spain and Portugal, the Jews, which were us, were getting expelled. It said, which through the earlier Middle Ages had been the most tolerant land in Christendom, because Spain tolerated all types of religions, Islam, Christianity, and so-called Judaism, became, as the 15th century advanced, the most fanatically intolerant. Now, I'm going to go into some more history, proving that there were Israelites in Spain during Solomon's reign. All right, it says the presence in Spain has been traced authoritatively as far back as the 4th century CE, which is around 400 AD. But it is probably more ancient than that. Some of them identified the mysterious Tarshish of the Old Testament with the Hispano-Roman town of Tarsus, implying that King Solomon's ships could have made a colony of Israelite merchants there. This would have made the Jewish presence in Spain as ancient as that other Semitic one, the Phoenician. So the Phoenicians were Semitic. Now, this is important that this book points out that the Phoenicians are Semitic, because the original Phoenicians was Tyre and Sidon, which was Hamites. So Israelites took over Phoenicia. You know, so that's something very important to point out. Now, let's see. Is there anything else here immediately? No. Let's go. Oh, yeah. Jake persecuting the so-called Jews, because after Yahushua, you know, the religion known as Christianity came to be widespread, now you had people that believed in Christianity that were persecuting people that held on to the original beliefs before Yahushua. Because you had Jews that converted to Christianity during the time of Yahushua that kept the real religion, so-called religion. And then you had a whole bunch of them that merged, you know, with the explosion of Christianity, with the paganism mixed into it. So it says, this was natural, for though the Visigothic kings of Spain had once, while they were still Arian Christians, been tolerant of Judaism, their conversion to Roman Orthodoxy in the 6th century had turned them into the worst persecutors of Jews in all Western Christendom. Reading on a little bit, in that period, the most severe persecutions of Jews in Spain came not from Christians, but unwantedly from Muslims. From those new waves of fanatical Berber invaders, the Almoravids and the Almohades, who had finally provoked a Christian reconquest in earnest. El Cid, the exemplary knight of Christian Spain in that era, welcomed Jews into his entourage, and though literature shows him engaging in trickery in his dealings with Jewish merchants, this is merely the sportsmanship of survival, clearly untinged by any racial or theological vindictiveness. Right? So Israelites were persecuting the real Israelite Jews. All right, now I want to point out, because this goes into a lot of history. This book proves, or this book goes into Esau being enslaved. We had the white man in slavery during the Dark Ages, man. You know, the teachings that were brought out by One West back then with Ariah and Tahar, Apostle Tahar, and all the elders of back then, that history is true, man. Said al-Andalusi, aka the Spaniard and 11th century writer of Toledo, observed that the cold northern climate was what made peoples like the Slavs and Bulgars, two Edomite nations, two other prominent sources of chattel slaves in both Christendom and Islam, hence the derivation of our word Slav, pale of color, lank-haired, fat, coarse-humored, and stupid. So the fucking white man was stupid, and he was pale as fuck. Alright, so that's it on that. I mean, there's more, but I want to get the main points, because, you know, you could, this is a 400-page book plus, 400 plus pages. Over 400 pages. Page 66. There had always been isolated converts from Judaism to Christianity in Spain, of course, but the sudden appearance of a large class of such conversos was converts, dates only from the riots of 1391. The mass conversions had, by and large, only replaced a religious problem with a social one, leaving behind them whole communities that were now Christian in name, but still Jewish in ethnic identity. Because as you read this book, you find out a lot of the people that converted to Christianity in Portugal and Spain primarily, they only did so that they didn't have to get expelled. But they were still practicing inside their home, but out in the street, they were Christian. It is well known to posterity that a substantial portion of them went on practicing Judaism in secret, holding Sabbath services and Jewish weddings in their shuttered homes, while carrying on a public display of participation in Sunday Mass, church weddings, and baptisms all their lives. So a lot of Jews, they wasn't so-called Jews, they were people of our nation, because as you read during the Dark Ages, the persecution of the Jews, those weren't the so-called white man Jews. Those were Israelites that continued in the Pharisee and Sadducee teachings prior to Yahushua. You know, so that's all that was. It wasn't Jews talking about the so-called white man Jews. All right, going further, you know, now enter Columbus. That's actually the name of the chapter, Enter Columbus. All his life, Columbus's ideas about geography were permeated with a peculiar religious mysticism. He kept a book of prophecies in which he collected quotations, mostly from the Bible, often those dealing with isles far off, that seemed to prophesy his own discoveries. It wasn't prophesying. He knew what the fuck he was going into. He knew about the so-called New World. Reading forward, it said, in the marginal notes to Columbus's copy of Daily is a relatively lengthy discourse on 2nd Ezra 6, verse 42, which reads, upon the third day thou didst command that the waters should be gathered up in the seventh part of the earth. 6 parts thou hast dried up and kept them, to the intent that of these some being planted of the Most High and tilled might serve thee. This was often to be cited by Columbus, who argued that since only 1/7 of the world was water, a good deal more dry land than yet was known remained to be discovered overseas. Little did he know that, you know, he knew about the Israelites. It said, if Columbus did indeed glimpse himself in the role of the man from the sea, then Esdras' identification of the peaceable multitude takes on special significance. And it says, and it talks about 2nd Esdras 13, verses 40 to 42, where it talks about the 10 tribes that were here in America. All right, now going further into Columbus, in page 84, it say Columbus certainly knew that Zacuto's work in astronomy and made use of it. Indeed, it was to save the discoverer's life one night when he pacified a group of hostile Indians in Jamaica. Now, these were Israelites of the Northern Kingdom, not Benjamin, because they hadn't been brought to Jamaica yet. By using Zacuto's Almanac Perpetuum to predict successfully an eclipse of the moon. So he was in Jamaica, and he was about to get attacked by some Indians, and he successfully predicted an eclipse of the moon. So it says, an ironic aspect of this story is the fact that the Almanac Perpetuum, finished by Zacuto in 1478, the year the Inquisition began, was originally written in Hebrew. So the Almanac Perpetuum was originally written in Hebrew and intended mainly for such pious purposes as the calculation of the new moon for the Jewish calendar, which is lunar. As a matter of fact, it was a Jew who translated the book into Latin only about 10 years before Columbus's exploit with it. Joseph Vinzino of Lisbon, who had sat on the Portuguese Royal Commission that rejected Columbus's project in 1484. You know, so that's pretty clear cut, man. Moving forward, Columbus's Golden World, chapter 8 of this book. It says, we do not know. Oh yeah, this is important. We do not know much concerning Columbus's crew of about 90 men aboard 3 ships, but at least one of them was an Israelite whose presence as such was not merely accidental. This was Louis de Torres, a convert of possibly only that year, meaning he just converted to Christianity, who had once held a position with the governor of Murcia. He was said to have known Hebrew, Aramaic, and some Arabic. 3 languages which are very similar, by the way. I had been brought on by Columbus specifically as an interpreter. One of the purposes of the voyage, as we have seen, was to find the Great Khan, and Taurus was to be the mouthpiece for this encounter, presumably on the basis of his Hebrew. Perhaps Columbus and his supporters had decided that the Great Khan, reported on by Marco Polo and others, might be the Israelite king who dwelt across the river from Prester John. Moron Columbus, aka the Moron Columbus. This is a description of the Israelites by one of them cracker fucks. They manifest great love towards all others in preference to themselves, meaning they treated others better than they treated themselves. They were great hosts, basically. He writes, they also give objects of great value for trifles. So they just gave away gifts that were actually very valuable and content themselves with very little or nothing in return. At all times, he strove to set a good example to the natives, he says, because he regarded them as excellent candidates to become Christians by persuasion. They practice no kind of idolatry, but have a firm belief that all strength and power, and indeed all good things, are in heaven, and that I had descended from there with these ships and sailors. It was under this impression that I received after they had cast aside their fears. I did not find, Columbus writes, I believe that was probably Columbus that wrote that other stuff, but I did not find, Columbus writes, any bestial among them, as some of us had expected, but on the contrary, men of great deference and kindness. So this goes to show we didn't practice bestiality like the fucking white man expected. Neither are they black like the Ethiopians. So wait a minute, now we have a problem here. These are Israelites that were not black, or didn't fit into the description of black. It says they are not black like the Ethiopians. So they could have been dark skinned, they could have been light skinned, but they weren't, you know, very dark. All right. It says, he goes on, their hair is smooth and straight, for they do not dwell where the rays of the sun strike most vividly. Okay. Let's see. Now, I want to get into another point that's really deep point here. It says in page 106, even more to the point than the dim image of witchcraft is the vivid one of the devil, who for centuries now had been black. This may seem a truism until we realize Satan has no color in any of his appearances in the Old and New Testament, except for chapter 12 of the Revelation of St. John, where he appears as a serpent that is quite red. On the other hand, his blackness emerges distinctly as a most significant, or in a most significant text of the 6th century CE, the apocryphal Acts of Thomas. For example, a woman who had been resurrected from the dead by Thomas describes her descent into hell this way. A man who took me was hateful to look upon, altogether black, and his raiment exceedingly foul, and took me away to a place wherein were many pits, and a great stench and hateful odor issued thence. In another place, the wife of one of Thomas's disciples is raped by devils, whom she described thus: I saw a black man standing over against me, nodding at me with his head, and a boy like unto him standing by him. And I said to my daughter, look at those two hideous men, whose teeth are like milk and their lips like soot. Soot is black. You know what I'm saying? So for years, now this is important to understand, because why was the devil looked at as a black man for years? Because everybody was black for years. The devil, the literal, like the spiritual Satan, the heavenly Father, Yahushua. But this book just said the devil, until it was known that he was actually the devil. The physical counterpart was red. All right. So moving forward. Oh shit.